Hi, this is Heidi, episode 46, What Motivates Us? Life isn't a spectator sport. Success comes to those who show up every day with a pocket full of courage, grit, and a little sparkle. I'm glad you're here. Well, hello, friends, my podcast listeners. I see you. I love you. Thank you, as always, for being here. And thank you for your reviews in iTunes. A few weeks ago, Janae, mom of 3, wrote on iTunes, "I need this. I have 2 teenagers, soon to be 3. Couldn't have come at a better time." Well, awesome. I'm glad I can support y'all through whatever time and stage you are in. I'm preparing and recording this podcast on a rainy day in coastal North Carolina. Even the beautiful beach towns need some rain. I'm here intentionally to have some one-on-one time with one of my teenagers, not smothering him in my attention. That's not what 16-year-olds want, but creating space to connect with him without distractions. And I'm noticing several qualities and strengths he has that I don't normally see in our usual environment. It's great. Okay, on to more about you, less about me. Motivation, actually understanding our basic human primitive motivational wiring is what I want to talk about today. When we understand this, we can interpret what we do and what other people do in different and more productive ways. And because our basic brain wiring for motivation doesn't serve us very well now in 2020. In fact, it's working against us. Our brains were designed to keep us alive above anything else. To meet this goal, we have 3 primary motivators in life. Our ancestors had these 3 motivators, and we still do. We just don't need them in the same way our ancestors did. Many different scientists and psychologists call this the Motivational Triad. We are designed to do these 3 things. 1, seek pleasure. 2, avoid pain. And 3, conserve energy. Now, looking back at our primitive ancestors, they needed the desire to seek pleasure, which could be connecting with other people, having sex to create more humans, find food that provided high calories and energy, and seeking comfort in safe dwellings. That was their pleasure. They didn't have the false pleasures that we have today. I'll talk more about that in a second. Second, they needed to avoid pain. Now that seems obvious. Pain in many cases meant death to them. So avoiding that at all costs was critical. And third, they needed to be motivated to do these things using as little energy as possible because they needed energy to stay alive. So their brain motivated them to use as little effort to achieve their goals. Okay, so fast forward to today. We live in a much different world, but we still have the same brain with these 3 basic motivators. Our brain wants us to seek pleasure still, and the world in 2020 provides a lot of pleasure. We have real, genuine pleasure, and we have false pleasures all just a click away. And it's easy for false pleasures to eclipse the lasting pleasures of deep friendships, relationships, meaningful accomplishments, because those pleasures take time to create. False pleasures are us finding quick hits of dopamine, and all of us are tempted by this in different ways. Maybe too much shopping, social media, pornography, overeating. Very few people overeat on chicken or vegetables because they do not provide the quick chemical high, which is exactly how our brains were developed. Our primitive brain needed us to have a heightened desire for foods that would keep our energy or fat on our bodies so we could survive a long winter. Now, in 2020, this is now working against us. High calorie, high fat, salty, sweet foods are actually now what is faster and more convenient to get. And food companies know this, y'all, and they design foods to be addicting and to be very easy to get. So just knowing this, we can understand why we desire certain foods. Know that there's nothing wrong with us. The person who only eats salads and protein isn't a better person. They still have a human brain. They have probably just conditioned their brain to desire less of the high-calorie foods. As evolved humans, we have to do the extra work of using our prefrontal cortex to manage these desires for these false pleasures. Some of you might be wondering, well, why is it a false pleasure? I actually feel a high degree of pleasure eating a lot of cupcakes or buying a new wardrobe or watching porn. It's false in two ways. First, it's a need pretending to be necessary, but in fact, it's us filling an internal need with something external, which never works. And these pleasures create more negative in our life later. The use of pornography could damage current relationships and rewire our brains too. Many cupcakes and high-fat, high-calorie foods create many negative effects of obesity. So these things provide instant gratification, but in overabundance, the delayed effects are negative. Now, adding to the current conundrum of our brain seeking pleasure is the way social media makes us think everyone else is really happy. So we have this additional false sense that we're less happy, we have less pleasure than other people, which is totally not the case. Okay, the second motivator, to avoid pain, might seem useful now, like I also try to avoid death, just like you, but our lives are not as threatened as our ancestors were. Most of us live with more security and safety, and in fact, now the bigger source of pain for us is emotional pain. So this isn't as useful to us now. Emotional pain is not going to kill us the same way a spear would have killed us. We're better off just allowing and processing emotional pain. But guess what? Our brain still instinctually wants us to avoid it. And yep, we now have tons and tons of false pleasures to help us avoid pain, but we're avoiding the wrong pain. And now the third motivator, doing all of this using less energy. So we stay alive. That's also working against us in many ways. If you're like me, we have to intentionally schedule exercise, movement, releasing energy into our lives. My new smartwatch just dinged and told me it's time to get moving some. That is a modern need. Our ancestors didn't need anything telling them to move. That would have worked against them. Okay, so why is it useful for us to know these things? First, when you find yourself with the desires of more pleasure, less pain, or wanting to stay on the couch all day, know you are normal and have a human brain, period. In fact, just knowing it requires energy to change your focus from a show on Netflix to getting up and going outside to cut the lawn. Your prefrontal cortex has to come in and use energy to say, get up, go cut the lawn while it's good weather and daylight, and you'll be happy you did so. You'll be glad you used your energy that way. You might not be happy while you're doing it, but you'll be happy when it's done. That conversation with yourself takes energy and more modern motivation. It's us creating motivation by creating a vision of happiness and success at a future time, a delayed gratification. When you find yourself really enjoying the pleasures of more food, or find yourself grabbing handfuls of chocolate chips after a heated debate with a teenager or spouse, know your brain doesn't like the emotional pain of the argument, and it wants the false pleasure of the sugar to avoid the emotions. Well, at least that's how my brain operates. I have to close up that bag and hide those chocolate chips. So many people say how hard it is to get motivated to get out of bed to exercise, or after work, they want to come home and relax, not go to the gym, even if they were at a job sitting at a desk all day. Our instincts are to use less energy. Everyone who sees someone else exercising, you see people that have had to use their higher brain, their prefrontal cortex, to override this desire to stay in bed or stay on the couch. Many exercisers, including myself, have found we feel better afterward, and that's one reason we like to exercise. But notice that it's a delayed gratification. It takes work to wake up early, put on exercise clothes, actually go out and walk or turn on the Peloton exercise videos. I know of many people who say they just can't wake up early because the night before they want to keep on watching shows. They don't want to go to bed early. Notice how that is not wanting to go through the pain and use the energy to go to bed early because we need to delay that gratification. What we want is going to come down the line. Now, every time we do it, we're short-circuiting our primitive survival instincts, and we're giving them more updated information, which is we need to move and exercise to be healthy and actually survive in this modern world. Okay, knowing our children have these same basic 3 motivators helps us understand why they try to use little effort at times to reach a goal. Almost all of my friends and myself have had at least one example, and probably many more, of this during this virtual school time during COVID. Most of our schools adopted a pass-fail grading system for the last quarter. Yours probably did this since it was all sprung on us and the teachers. A lot of children then adopted the thinking, well, I just need to do 51% of the work and I'm going to pass the class, which is the equivalent of an A. One of my good friends told me she looked online and she saw her son had a 10% in physics, and he had always gotten A's in physics. And she asked him, oh my goodness, what is going on here? I think she had a lot more energy and frustration behind it. He explained his plan to limit his effort. She then inspired him. Maybe there were some threats used too, but she got him to work and he got his grade up to something that they both agreed on. Now, one of my sons did lots of little minor work at the beginning of quarantine, and now his teachers have already put in his pass grade because he has over 50%. And he isn't doing more of the final work. Of course, it could be debated that he should do it to learn the material. But look at this situation and your children and their effort from the standpoint that they have a human brain. They're also driven by these 3 core motivators. Them wanting to do 52% of the work to get the pass, which is seeking pleasure, is exactly what they are programmed to do. They are avoiding pain and energy expenditure by not doing the remaining 48% of the work. They aren't lazy. They aren't lacking motivation, although it's easy for us to think those things and maybe say them, but it isn't true. They are working just the way their brains are designed. We have much more supportive and loving conversations with them when we want to get them to do more of these things if we approach the conversation not thinking something's wrong with them. We also don't want to say things to them, labeling or shaming or criticizing, that become their inner dialogue. So understanding their brain helps us avoid these comments. So beware, if they want to sit playing Xbox, that's just their brain working. Now, yes, in 2020, these motivators are now working against them and against us. Doing this all day is not going to lead to long-term success and gratification. So this is where we want to model for our children and teach them how to think their way to creating their own motivation. But remember, human brains are not fully developed until maybe ages 25 or 27. So again, understanding and patience are much more useful emotions for us. The good news is that modern emotional health is slowly becoming something we address. There are many more coaches, therapists, wellness experts to help us understand what is going on inside our brain and our body. And we need it now more than ever, as this world is changing, and our survival instincts, if always heeded, are going to do more harm in the long run. Okay, I really hope you have enjoyed learning about these 3 primary motivators. I find they really change how I look at myself and interpret what my desires are, and also how I look at and interpret my children and what they want to do, and not making things be wrong and not making it mean something bad when my children want to do something that is really what their primitive brain is just wanting them to do. Okay, that's it for this week. Make sure you are signed up for the weekly Sunday Sunshine, as well as occasional emails about podcasts and other news. When you're ready to apply this work on a much deeper and transforming level, sign up for a free consult call on HeidiBenjaminson.com. That's where you can sign up for the Sunday Sunshine as well. Why not change your perspective, your confidence, your emotions now while your children are home? You've always hired coaches for them. Now it's time for you to have a coach, and I'd be honored to be yours. Have a great week.